Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Rhyme of the Times for the week ending 10th of August 2024. English protests are repressed and the villains are processed. Starmer's anger is expressed, but Musk isn't impressed with the way the issue has been addressed. Walz supports Kamala's quest for election success. Putin has much to digest and cause to be stressed as Ukraine's army has progressed into Russia's southwest. Netanyahu obsessed with having enemies suppressed, leaving many people depressed and distressed, and peace hopes in a mess. One of Test cricket's best, now at eternal rest. Throughout the weekend, violence had continued. More flashpoints in England's towns and cities ensued. Our country in shame and ignominy imbued as right-wing rhetoric on social media was spewed. And a disillusioned minority was wooed by immigration logic that some may find skewed. So they took to the streets to get their point through, but lost their argument with each brick they threw, till it was clear this was actually nothing new, just a bunch of violent people causing a to-do. For Sir Keir Starmer, though, it was his first big test, and he called 3 cobras to tame the viper's nest of criminals involved in nationwide protests. The government had the problem quickly addressed. After cities had burned in a fever like a furnace, courts were told to put on the afterburners, judges making quick judgments with little rest. The wretches and wrongdoers quickly processed, a conveyor belt of society's assortment of pests, given dollops of porridge and shamed in the press. By Wednesday it appeared England was past the worst, with mobs amassing but then being dispersed. Outnumbered by counter-protest demonstrators, the rioters took one look and said, "See you later." The PM addressed the public with resolute words. These are right-wing thugs and they must never be heard. Many thought the approach adopted by Sir Keir was surprisingly inflammatory and a little cavalier. Quashing dissent so it's out of mind, out of sight is likely to one day come back to bite. Then again, political influence can be over-egged. In the end, the police should stand on their own 2 legs. Apolitical, independent, their own rules and regs, their own judgment to deal with society's dregs. At times they look like mugs against these dregs on drugs, beer-fueled reprobates, yobbos and thugs. The indigenous growl had turned to a wild howl, with multiculturalism forced upon them cheek by jowl. So immigration is blamed by the right, who cry foul. Let's face it, they were never going to throw in the towel. And then Elon Musk caused Sir Keir to scowl by channeling his innermost Enoch Powell, claiming civil war in the UK is now certain. All hopes of redemption have gone for a Burton. The owner of X heaped blame on Sir Keir for creating systems that are somehow 2-tier. Kamala on Tuesday in Philadelphia announced her new running mate Tim Walz was here, and it didn't dampen Democrats' soaring mood, because most seem to think Walz is one solid dude. The Democrat Party is dancing, waltzing if you will, moving in for a fireworks night election kill. A missile hit Majdal Shams on 27th of July, caused 12 Israelis, mainly children, to die. There had been spectators at a game of football. Israel's response was swift and brutal, striking into Lebanon and Iran with vigour, taking out Hezbollah and Hamas leading figures. The second of these 2 assassinations was the guy in charge of hostage negotiations. Ismail Haniyeh was more pacific by all accounts, but Netanyahu appears to not care 1 ounce. What is certain, by having these men extinguished, prospects for a settlement have been relinquished. And then on Saturday came another onslaught, as Israel again gave its own reputation no thought. A missile apparently hit a school in Gaza, turned it into a pile of rubble and plaster. Over 70 people died in the fire and flames, 19 Hamas terrorists amongst them, Israel claims. But Israel now have their foes' backs up, and their friends are less inclined to give them backup. A brave or dumb bloke, Netanyahu's gone for broke, or using a stick to provoke, and with one fell stroke has his enemies' blood soaked as their leaders croak. The Iranian bear is poked and Houthis' fire is stoked as the wrath of Hezbollah and Hamas is invoked. Whatever, for Israeli folk it ain't no joke. There's been months of stalemate in the war in Ukraine, but this week the focus turned to Russian terrain. Russian civilians faced the tears and fears that Ukrainians have endured for 2.5 years. The Kursk region in Russia suffered incursion, the Ukrainians by surprise and with great exertion, taking villages, causing mass local dispersion, and for Putin a massive unwanted diversion. Both sides making propaganda assertions. To pre-war status quo, Ukraine seeks reversion. By severing supply lines and grabbing Russian land, they'll have a much stronger bargaining hand, more levers to pull, which should enable better odds at the negotiating table. Russian land and prisoners can be traded for what Russia has taken since it invaded. Urgency for Ukraine has become all-consuming with the chance of a Trump presidency looming. And finally, to shock news from the world of sport. On Sunday we learnt of the death of Graham Thorpe, a solid and effective England cricket batter. Whatever the conditions, it didn't matter. 100 test matches, and many thought he was one of the best in the 90s and noughties. At 55 we're now saying R.I.P. Thorpe.